Do we have any English teachers here? Where? Let me see. No way. All right, English teachers, I got one for you. If you can pronounce my name that is not in English, I'll give you a cookie. My name is Luis Roberto Caballero Orozco de Heredia Jimenez. And I am an English teacher. We come in many different shapes and sizes, as you can tell. I am thrilled to be the program director for this year's international conference.
When did you first come to Korea? Why did you come to Korea all those years ago?
Yeah, so I first arrived to Korea in the fall of 2014, which at this point is 5 years ago, almost the day. And at the time I was living in Mexico City, and I was out there teaching and doing a little bit of job hunting as well. Just
were you teaching English in Mexico City?
I was teaching corporate English there.
Wow.
My background is as an ESL teacher. I taught at the time I had taught university in the US and in other places. And so I was in Mexico City and I was job hunting, and I found a job at a Korean company. And at the time
in Mexico City.
In Mexico City,
wow.
Yeah. And I thought that the job was going to be in Mexico City. That was the job that I applied for. But then when I went in for the interview and afterwards, they ended up offering me a job out in Korea.
You had no idea when you were applying. They were like, pack your suitcase. You're going to Korea.
Well, I mean, I had applied for a specific job there, working like in their marketing department. That's a really big thing happening right now in Latin America, especially in Mexico. There's a lot of Korean like multinational corporations are setting up their operations there. And once they saw on my CV that I had teaching experience and that I had learned a little bit of Korean language in university, they asked, well, how would you feel about going out to Korea? There's an operation out there that is working to prepare the Korean employees to move abroad and live as expats for about 3 or 4 years. And, the job was to prep them, doing language teaching.
What was your initial reaction when they made this pitch you to live in the other side of the world for a few years?
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised. I mean, I toyed with the idea of moving out to Korea and seeing what life was like over there. I had an interest in Korea, just kind of culturally, and I was surprised, to say the least. I was caught off guard, and
so you prepared for this big move, and then I guess you're on the airplane flying from Mexico City to Incheon. Yeah.
Well, I Chicago to sort a few items, and then from O'Hare.
And then you arrive in Korea. Usually people have this honeymoon period where everything is rosy and it's a fantastic new adventure. Was it the same for you when you first arrived? Was it something exciting? And what was your first impression when you got off the plane?
It wasn't like anything I'd ever experienced before. Well, when I first got off the plane, I actually remember like taking out my phone just to send a message to my family back home saying I arrived safely. But I just remember.
Oh yeah, I think everybody does that.
My first message though to like my family was just, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into this time? Like it finally hit me, the full weight of it, that I was actually there and that I was actually going to be, doing this. But
did somebody pick you up at the airport, or you had to make your own?
Yeah. The company had provided for like a pickup service, and which I thought was really generous of them. And I don't know, I felt like such a fish out of water. And the person who picked me up was very nice, very welcoming, and drove me to the company housing. And
not straight into the classroom, I hope. Yes.
No. I did have about a day and a half to recover from the jet lag.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was enough time, and like you said, there was this honeymoon period afterwards where just everything was so novel and different and just exciting, and I was so curious about what it was like to live there, and like I
And
wanted to.
which area were you living in at that
I was
point
in
when you?
Seoul.
Oh, in
Yeah, I was
Seoul,
in
so
Seoul.
straight into
I
the big
arrived
city. Yeah.
right to the heart of Gangnam was where my
Wow.
job was, and so it was like something out of a movie. Um, and
Yes,
yeah,
it's
that's
one of the wealthiest areas in Korea, and you were
oh
working there.
yes, yeah.
How long did you stay in Gangnam? Were you working for teaching corporate students or doing marketing work?
Yeah, so I spent my first year just going between Seoul and Paju, which is up north
Ah, I think that's the
still.
northernmost city. Is that right? So
Yeah, it's
it's
where the
very
DMZ
high up
is.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that was an interesting ride there. There's like a corporate training facility for the company, like a big campus, and there's
Yeah.
dormitories there. And so we would stay there overnight, Monday through Friday, and I mean it was intense. Like they were pretty strict about people leaving the premises, um, and
People
the thing
as
that was
in staff, like teachers.
yeah, like
Wow.
during the
So
week we're not allowed to leave. I mean, we could leave if there was like an emergency or whatever, if we have to go to the doctor, but things like going off campus to run errands, going grocery shopping, going out to eat, like things like that, we were not allowed to do. We
mm,
were there. Um, we were on the clock from 8 a.m. till about 9 p.m., sometimes later, Monday
yeah,
through Friday. And, they were
that's
pretty,
interesting. I've not heard that before in Korea. That would be a
really,
unique
oh boy.
experience.
Oh, well, yes, yes.
And
It's
you
definitely,
worked there for about a year, and then after that, you got into the university system. Is that
yeah.
right?
Right, yeah, like my background is in teaching, and so I had taught high school and university before I moved out to Korea, and doing the corporate gig, just I realized that it wasn't where I envisioned my career going, so I thought
Yeah.
that it would be good to leave, and I ended up getting a job at a university down in Cheonan in Chungcheongnam-do, which is about an
Yeah.
hour south of
Yeah.
and yeah, and I was
And
there.
I guess a very different lifestyle. No curfews, or
My
you got to
God,
be
yeah.
here and here. Yeah.
It was Wayne, it was the weirdest feeling. It was like I just remember having all this free time to myself, just all this time to myself, and I had like forgotten how to do a whole bunch of adult life skills, like
Welcome back
going
to the real world.
grocery
Yeah.
shopping, and it was just such a weird period of adjustment, but it was for the
Same
better.
for me. Yeah, I remember when I first my first day in a university job, and
Mhm.
they said, "Well, your classes start in 2 weeks," and I'm sitting there, and I say, "Well, what do I do now?" Because it's between
Yeah,
9 and 5 p.m. They were like, "Well, go shopping, do whatever you want, come back when it's your
right.
classes."
Exactly. Yeah,
And
yeah. That's really one of the perks I think of teaching university, and I sound like such a I listen to myself say it out loud, but like it's it is kind of hard for me at least to figure out what I'm gonna do with like the downtime.
yeah,
Especially because you know that you have a class happening later on in the day, so you have to time it just right to get back to campus in time to prep for that. But
yeah.
that was one of the downsides for me, at least, of teaching university out in Korea,
Mm.
is I just constantly had downtime, and I'm like, okay, what am I going to do with it? And I would feel kind of panic stricken if I wasn't feeling like I was
Well,
being
I
productive.
think I think you did find a solution to that problem, and it might have been
Oh
KOTESOL,
yeah,
which
oh yeah.
certainly would have filled up a lot of your time, I guess. How did you first learn about KOTESOL? Was it you saw a Facebook post, or a leaflet, or a friend kind of said something? How did you get to hear about KOTESOL?
Yeah, through Facebook. Through I had a friend when I lived in Cheonan who was really active in KOTESOL. He was like the research committee chair, and he had kind of planted that bug several years prior to when I actually did end up getting involved,
Yeah,
saying, "Oh, you should join KOTESOL. It's really good professional development." But it wasn't until about a year and a half later that I actually sought it out. I had moved down to Ulsan,
oh, okay,
that's
yeah,
next to Busan, to start a new job at another university there, and I thought that I should really focus more time into professional development and just looked up the local chapter Facebook page and got in touch with the chapter president. And I happened to be.
How was the first event that you went to? Was it a local chapter event or a conference?
It was the regional conference. When I
Right.
reached out to the president of the chapter, it was like right when she was in the midst of putting the conference together.
Wow.
And when I used to live here in the U.S., I was involved in a couple of different related organizations for ESL teaching and for college counseling, which is something else that I was doing prior to going out to Korea. And I had worked to put together conferences and seminars. So I thought, oh, well, if you need any help, please, let me know. And you know that whenever you say something like that in KOTESOL, people are more than happy to put you to work. And
yes, like sign up now. Come join my team.
Yeah, come join right now. Put you to work. Start tomorrow. Start immediately. So I was a part of the conference planning team for that regional conference, and I got to meet a lot of national leaders, the national president, and some other really important figures who were there at that conference. And I went right into the belly of the whale.
Yeah, I guess you jumped straight in. I remember the first time I think I met you, or at least the first time we crossed paths, was in Daejeon. I think it was an international conference committee meeting. It might have been 2018 when I first saw you, probably around May time or something like that. So you went into the local chapter level, helping with a bit of conference planning, but it seems like quite quickly you got into, I guess, the upper echelons of KOTESOL, international conference planning, and these kinds of positions.
Yeah, within I think like 6 to 9 months of me joining the organization, I was already, like you said, involved in the upper echelons of decision making with the international conference, and then working with the SIG as well, the Special Interest Group of Justice. I think that also kind of elevated my profile among the upper bigwigs. Just seeing the kinds of discussions that I was a part of on the Facebook page and the types of projects that I was proposing KOTESOL pick up. People took interest and said, oh, it'd be really great if you could get involved in the international conference, if you could, think about running for office. And the rest is
that's right. The positions I know that you had, diversity chair was one of them. I think that was, were you the first ever diversity chair? Is that right?
I was.
I
was, yeah. Yeah, it's a new position that formed like earlier this year at the start of 2019, and the president of KOTESOL approached me and thought that I would be a good fit for it, and I thought it over. Every time I accepted it.
Oh, that's good. And your first role on an international conference committee, it was, I guess, programs. Is that right? Working as a program manager.
That's right.
And then that was 2018. Is that right? And then the next year, of course, you became the director. You're now the spearhead. You're at the top. How did it feel knowing you would be taking on all this new pressure, all this new responsibility as a director rather than a manager the next year?
Well, what definitely helped was that about halfway into the program manager gig, it became apparent that I was going to take over the following year as program director. And so once I knew that was going on, I started paying really close attention to the way that a lot of things happen, and figured out how things would work out the following year. So that definitely helped. But when the time actually came for me to put together the program team and do all the initial groundwork, because with international conference, it's in October, but there is a lot of initial groundwork that happens between November of the previous year through March or April of the year of the conference. So those first 4 or 5 months, there's a lot of groundwork that happens with opening the call for proposals, with putting together the people who are going to be actually reading them, making decisions as far as what you want to highlight, what you want to emphasize. And that was when I realized that this was going to be a lot more work than I was anticipating. And fortunately, I had like just a really fantastic group of people working on the program team this year who stepped up when I put out the plea and the invitations for people to come and join the program team. There were just some really, really talented young teachers who stepped up and got involved. So that made life a lot easier.
That's my impression as well. You had Vanessa Virgil, is that right?
Yeah.
Madeline
Wunderlich, yeah.
Yeah. And
Danny Phillips.
Okay. But it sounded like you have a great team, had a great team, and I heard lots of great feedback on the program. And
oh, thank you.
I think it's a shame that you won't be doing it again next year because you did such a great job. But I hope it looks like you've put some great steps in place for whoever is directing it for the next year.
Thank you. Yeah, we did work really hard on it. And normally I think one of my flaws is that I don't know how to handle receiving compliments. For this, I'm like, yes, you're right. It was great.
That's right. I deserve this compliment.
Great job. Because we did work really hard. There were a lot of hours that went into it. I mean, I'm sure with publicity, which you were in charge of, it was pretty similar. You spend a lot of nights in front of your computer well into 1 or 2 in the morning.
I think that's right. Program and publicity are quite similar in that so much work happens before the conference. Maybe some other departments, the conference is the big day where it's like they're just waiting and waiting. Whereas I think program and publicity is so much of the work is leading into the conference.
Actually, those last weeks leading into it, definitely.
And you brought some exciting new ideas into the international conference. It wasn't kind of like previous international conferences. There were some new ideas. One of them was KOTESOL Gives Back.
Yeah.
I recently put an article on the KOTESOL website about that. Could you give some background? How did that come about? I only kind of saw the tail end of it, promoting it, publicizing it. But how did this initial idea come into place? How did it kind of happen?
Yeah, at the time I was a diversity chair of the organization as well, and so since I wore many hats, I started thinking about the international conference from a diversity and advocacy perspective, and the program manager Vanessa and I started thinking about what are some ways that KOTESOL could take a more active role in promoting social justice principles. And we started looking around at what some of our sister organizations had done in the past, and saw that there was quite a bit of philanthropy and organizing fundraisers happening at their regional and international conferences. And so we thought that would be a really good model to adapt for the KOTESOL International Conference. And so what KOTESOL Gives Back is it's a fundraising program that we run at the conference, at the international conference, and we selected 2 really just outstanding nonprofit organizations that work with some of Korea's most marginalized populations, and facilitated some fundraising for them, had them come and share with us their organizational mission, do a presentation on who they are, who their students are, the communities that they serve. And it was a really big hit. It was a really big hit at the conference.
They raised quite a lot of money. Is that right? In the end?
1.4 million won by the last
Wow.
Really
and I think, in my opinion, this is going to become, I guess, kind of the Luis legacy of the international conference. I can see this continuing every year now. KOTESOL Gives Back. So that's really good. What were some other things you brought to program?
A part of it was more back-end work, putting in processes in place, putting in ways to make the planning run more smoothly with different deadlines and things. And Grace Wang, the chair of the conference, also was really helpful in helping me do that, since she created this timeline manual step by step for the conference, for the planning process, and so that really helped. In addition to that, we made some changes to the scheduling of the 9 a.m. session on Saturday.
Yeah.
Just kind of experimented with, what would happen if we only scheduled 7 or 8 presentations instead of
That's
the
right. Yeah.
4. And we found that most people for the international conference, they don't attend sessions until either 10 a.m. or 11 a.m.
Yeah.
And so that I think that the presenters who presented at 9 a.m. appreciated having less competition that they were up against, and by that way they were able to get a higher turnout to their session at 9 a.m. on Saturday. For next year, I'd be curious to see what would happen if we did the same thing for 9 a.m. on Sunday, because I know that a lot of people are out on Saturday night and don't make it to their Sunday morning session. So,
but yeah,
maybe
I think that was a very successful move. I saw a little bit of every single 9 a.m. Saturday session because I was going around with my video camera, and some of them were absolutely packed out. People were standing at the back, but there was no presentation room I entered where there was like 1 or 2 people. Every room had maybe 8, 9, at least 10 people in there. So I would say that's very different to previous years when, you've got a lot of presentations at the same time, and they're like, hey, when is somebody coming? So I thought that was very successful.
That's the motto for the ICC this year was to put people first.
Yeah.
To treat people well, treat people fairly, and I think having that in the front of my mind as we were putting together the program, I thought about the fact that a lot of these presenters are coming to us from literally across the world, from places as far away as the US or Canada or Australia. And they're putting a lot of time and effort into preparing their presentation. They genuinely believe in what they're presenting about. They genuinely think that it's going to help teachers work with their students better and more effectively in the classroom. So, just the professional courtesy I think that we could grant presenters is if we're going to have them present at 9 a.m. And make out of bed super early in the morning, most likely jet lagged. The least that we could do from a professional courtesy is to try to maximize the turnout for their session as much as possible.
I think that's right. I've done a lot of presentations myself, and if I put the time and effort in creating a presentation, trying to make it interesting and useful, I always want as many people in the room as possible. Otherwise, I'd be a little bit disappointed. Like I've put all these hours in trying to create the perfect presentation.
Right, and printing handouts.
3 or 4 people. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that was a very good move.
Okay.
Now you're out of Korea. I guess you have a slightly different perspective. I'm still in Korea. I'm going to be here for the foreseeable future. How do you see the future of, I guess, English education in Korea, or the field? There's a lot of talk about a lot of changes, maybe teachers losing their jobs, decreasing birth rates, and all different factors. How do you see it?
I mean, that's a really big question. That's a big question. I think that unfortunately a lot of the university level teachers, and I say this, someone who taught in the universities in Korea, that's kind of where my mind first wanders to. I think a lot of university teachers are going to be at risk of losing their positions if they don't get an advanced degree, or if they don't get, more specifically, an advanced degree in like something related to English or something related to education. That's just with the stipulations that the Ministry of Education is putting in place, where they want university teachers to show that they have specialized in the field that they are teaching. So I think that could potentially affect a lot of people. The Hagwon industry, I think, is also going to be facing some changes in the coming decade or so, because as you mentioned, the birth rate in Korea is at an all-time low. So you're just going to have fewer students in general, and it's going to be competitive for Hagwons to attract students and be able to provide them the types of classes that parents are expecting to see. What's interesting though is, and I don't know the answer to this question. I don't know how those two things might actually end up aligning.
Yeah.
Because in college admissions in Korea, more and more schools are moving away from doing something like the suneung, like the standardized testing,
Yeah.
As a requirement for admission. And they're starting to look at more like a holistic application, looking at, the students and not just their standardized testing scores and their grades. So, they're starting to do interviews with them. They're starting to see if they have any, interesting career goals, or if they have any interesting volunteer service or community service. And so it'll be really interesting to see, because a lot of these Hagwons, they are specialized in like boosting students' standardized testing exams for English and for math, for that matter. So it'll be really interesting to see if there's a noticeable shift in the criteria for college admissions, how that might affect the Hagwon industry.
It's definitely really interesting.
Public teaching as well.
Yeah, I'll be at the forefront of it, seeing what's going on, and I guess everybody in KOTESOL really. But it has fed into worries about job security. A lot of people I speak to nowadays are actually getting more involved in things like KOTESOL because they want to, put it on the resume. If they got an evaluation with their boss at the end of the year, they want to show, hey, look, look at all the work I'm doing. So it's going to be really interesting. That's the future of English education. How about the future of Luis? What's coming next for you?
I want to go back to school. It's always been a goal of mine to do my doctorate, and I'm not getting any younger. So I now
that's most people, yeah.
Well, yeah. But I definitely felt it this last year in Korea, where it did seem a little bit like I had kind of hit like this ceiling where I couldn't go any further, move any higher in my career. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to seek out, KOTESOL and things to get more professional development. But there does come a point where you hit a limit, I think, in Korea if you're teaching out there. And and for a lot of people, like that's they're fine with that because they might have families or they might have other obligations keeping them out in Korea if they move there from abroad. But for me, I felt like this was the time to make the move and go back to school.
And you will be staying in the field of TESOL, or will you be moving into a new area?
I will be staying within education. I don't know that teaching is going to be the primary focus of what I do right now. I do want to continue working with international students and working with English language learners. English is my second language, so this is a really an issue that hits really close to home for me. I do want to continue working with these populations of students, but probably not in a teaching capacity, probably more in like an advisory role, doing a lot of the things that I was doing as diversity chair with advocating for institutional reforms, making inclusive spaces for students from disadvantaged backgrounds. Like that's the kind of work that I envision my career going into.
That's very, very exciting. Last time I spoke to Kathleen Kelly, she was moving into event planning and all these these big dreams, and now it looks like you've got a very exciting path ahead of you as well. I just have one more question I want to ask you before we end this interview. How do you want people to remember you in KOTESOL? So in future conferences, when your name comes up, do you remember Luis? What do you want people to remember you by?
I guess I want people to remember the types of changes and reforms that I used to advocate for, the work that I was doing around diversity and social justice, encouraging teachers in Korea to think about their students as people first, with very complex personal lives that do spill over into the classroom, and that's students of all ages. And just really encouraging KOTESOL and encouraging teachers to think about how they can make their classrooms more inclusive of diverse voices and changing demographics. That's what I want to be remembered by. But don't worry, I mean, I'll be back. I'll be back in Korea. I'll be back.
Are you coming back? It's not the end
Well,
just
at
yet.
some point in the future, I do want to come back just because.
Coming back to visit or coming back to work?
To visit, but also, I think the type of work that I want to focus on for my dissertation, it's going to require coming back to Korea and doing a bit of research there.
That sounds good. We can do another follow-up interview, see how you're doing. Once you visit, that would be great.
Sure.
So thank you very much, Luis. You have a great KOTESOL story there, and certainly you've left quite the legacy over here. And I think we'll be hearing your name for many more years to come, especially when working on international conferences and things like that. So thank you very much, and good luck with your next step.
Thank you. You take really good care of yourself, and I'll be seeing you real soon.